Good evening, friends. Welcome back to Starlight News. I am so glad you're here with us tonight. Now, before we begin, I want you to think back, way back, to the best Christmas you ever had. Not the most expensive one, not the one with the most gifts under the tree. The best one. The one that still lives somewhere warm inside you when December comes around. Maybe you were a child. Maybe you were young and just starting out. Maybe it was a Christmas that surprised you, that came out of nowhere and reminded you what this season is really supposed to feel like. Hold on to that feeling, because tonight's story is going to take you right back there. Where are you watching from tonight, friends? Write it in the comments right now. And tell us, what year was your best Christmas? We want to know. Because tonight, we're going to talk about a Christmas that became the best day of dozens of people's lives. People who didn't see it coming. People who woke up that morning with nothing extraordinary on the horizon. And then Elvis Presley walked through the door.
The year was 1974. Memphis, Tennessee. December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. Now friends, I need you to feel this year for a moment. 1974. The country was tired. Watergate had just finished tearing Washington apart. Gas prices had doubled overnight. Inflation was eating at people's savings. Families were cutting back. Christmas lists were getting shorter. There was a heaviness in the air that December, the kind that settles in when people aren't sure what tomorrow looks like. And Elvis Presley was having one of the hardest years of his own life. He was 39 years old. His marriage to Priscilla had ended. He was performing constantly, Vegas, touring, always moving. But something in him was restless. The big houses and the entourage and the sequined jumpsuits couldn't fill something that had gone quiet inside him. People who knew him then say he seemed like a man searching, like a man who needed to remember what mattered. On the morning of December 23rd, he woke up at Graceland and made a decision. He called his friend and right-hand man, Jerry Schilling, and he said, and these are words Jerry would repeat for the rest of his life. He said, "Jerry, I want to go shopping, but not for me." Jerry asked what he meant. Elvis said, "I want to find people who need something, and I want to give it to them. Real people, strangers. I don't want to plan it, I just want to go." Jerry said he learned over the years that when Elvis had that particular tone in his voice, quiet, certain, decided, you didn't ask questions, you got your coat.
They started at the Southland Mall. Elvis and a small group, Jerry, a couple of security men, and his cousin Billy, arrived just after the mall opened. It was a Tuesday morning, not yet crowded. The Christmas decorations were up. Tinsel and lights and a Santa by the fountain with a line of children snaking around the corner. The first person Elvis noticed was a young mother. She was standing outside a toy store, holding a little girl, maybe 4 years old, on her hip. The little girl's face was pressed to the glass, staring at a doll in the window display. A beautiful doll in a red dress, the kind that opened and closed its eyes. The mother was staring too, but differently. Her face had that particular look that parents know, the quiet calculation, the mental arithmetic, this year it's just not possible. Elvis walked over. He introduced himself, though the woman recognized him immediately, her jaw dropping slightly. He asked the little girl her name. She said it was Caroline. He asked Caroline if that was the doll she wanted for Christmas. Caroline looked at her mother, then back at Elvis, then she nodded very seriously, the way 4-year-olds do when something matters enormously. Elvis went inside. He bought the doll. He also bought every other toy Caroline had paused in front of on the way in. A stuffed bear, a set of blocks, a little tea set. He carried the bags out himself and set them down in front of the little girl. Caroline stared at the bags. Then she looked up at this large man in the dark coat and the sunglasses, and she said very solemnly, "Are you Santa Claus?" Elvis crouched down to her level. He thought about it for a moment, and then he said, "I'm somebody who just really loves Christmas." Friends, that moment, right there, if you needed to understand Elvis Presley, who he really was underneath all of it, that is the moment.
They moved through the mall, store to store, hour by hour. Elvis and his group developed a quiet system. They would watch, they would listen. They were looking for the moments people didn't know they were broadcasting. The sighs, the hesitations, the things people touched and then gently put back on the shelf. A teenage boy stood for a long time in front of a guitar in a music store window, just looking, the way Elvis himself had once looked at things he couldn't afford. He went in and bought it, had it wrapped and sent to the boy before he'd even left the parking lot. An elderly man was at the jewelry counter, asking to see a locket, holding it up, reading the price tag, setting it down quietly. He was buying something for his wife, he told the salesperson. They'd been married 48 years. The salesperson said she was sorry, she understood. The old man said it was fine, he'd find something else. Elvis had been standing close enough to hear every word. He caught the salesperson's eye. He nodded toward the locket. The old man found the locket in a small wrapped box waiting at the counter when he came back with a less expensive alternative. The salesperson told him it had already been taken care of. He looked around, confused. Elvis was already gone. On and on it went. A family of 6 looking at a single small Christmas tree because the bigger ones were too expensive. Elvis bought them the biggest tree in the lot and arranged delivery for that afternoon. A young woman trying to decide between a winter coat and a gift for her mother. Elvis bought both. A little boy who had lost his gloves and was standing outside in the December cold while his grandmother searched her purse. Elvis took off his own scarf and wrapped it around the child before the grandmother even looked up. By noon, word had begun to spread through the mall. You could feel it, that particular electricity that moves through a crowd when something extraordinary is happening and people aren't quite sure what it is. Small clusters gathering, whispers, people craning their necks. Elvis's security team suggested they leave. Too many people were recognizing him now. It was becoming a scene. Elvis said, 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes became 2 more hours.
Now, friends, I want to sit with something for a moment. We live in a time, and I think you know this, where generosity has become a performance, where giving is photographed and posted and measured in likes, where the charity is sometimes less about the person receiving it and more about the person being seen giving it. Elvis went out that day with no cameras, no press release, no plan to announce it afterward. Half the people he gave to didn't even know his name by the time he walked away. He just went out into his city on a December morning and asked himself a simple question: who needs something today? And then he answered it. That's not a celebrity doing charity. That's a man remembering his mother's voice. That's a boy from a shotgun house in Tupelo who never forgot what it felt like to stand on the outside of a shop window and look in. That's what Christmas is supposed to be about. Not the size of the gift, the size of the attention, the willingness to see someone, to stop, to ask their name. Before we say goodnight, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it tonight. Is there someone you're going to see this Christmas, or maybe someone you haven't seen in a while, who could use a moment of being truly seen? Not a gift necessarily, just your full attention, your eyes on theirs, a question that says, "I see you, I'm glad you're here." You don't need $200,000. You need 5 minutes and the willingness to stop. Write it in the comments tonight. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what year your best Christmas was. And tell us, what's one thing you'll do differently this Christmas after hearing this story tonight? Because if Elvis Presley could take a December afternoon and turn it into something that changed dozens of lives, what could you do with just one? From all of us here at Starlight News, Merry Christmas, friends. God bless. And remember, the best gift you can give someone this season costs nothing at all. It just asks you to pay attention.